What kind of worthless junk did you give me? My father's voice didn't just cut through the music, it shattered the remains of my heart. Then came the slap. In front of 30 guests holding crystal flutes, on the night of his 55th birthday, I stood there with a burning cheek in a house I'd scrubbed on my hands and knees since sunrise. I ran out into the October chill with nothing but a backpack and a bruise. I didn't know it then, but that slap was the last thing Arthur Sterling would ever do to me. By midnight, I'd be sitting in a black SUV across from a stranger whose eyes matched mine, about to unravel 18 years of professional-grade lies. My name is Chloe, though for most of my life, I was forced to answer to Maya. Before we dive into the day my perfect family lost everything, please hit subscribe and join our community. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from today? I'd love to know. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. that morning, the same as every Saturday. But this wasn't just any weekend, it was Arthur Sterling's 55th birthday, which meant the air in our Henrico County home was thick with an extra layer of tension. On the granite kitchen island lay a 2-page handwritten list left by Beatrice. It wasn't a request, it was an ultimatum. Sweep the patio, arrange 32 folding chairs, press the linens, hand wash the Pottery Barn platters because the dishwasher leaves spots. To the neighbors on our quiet cul-de-sac, the Sterling house was a colonial masterpiece with a manicured lawn. Arthur made sure to tell everyone I was the one who kept it that way, though he hired professionals for the heavy lifting. Inside, the reality was grimmer. While they lived in luxury, my room was a windowless storage closet downstairs, tucked next to the water heater. My bed was a twin mattress Arthur had pulled from a curbside pile when I was 9, covered by a wool blanket that smelled like damp cardboard no matter how many times I scrubbed it. Upstairs, Sloane lived a different life. At 23, she had the queen bed, the Hollywood-lit vanity, and a credit card linked directly to Arthur's account. She hadn't learned how to boil an egg or fold a shirt because, in her words, that's what we have Maya for. I had spent 3 grueling months saving for Arthur's gift. I worked double shifts at a greasy spoon called Rosie's, earning $11 an hour scrubbing burnt sheet pans. My goal was an $84 leather wallet from a department store downtown. It sounds like nothing to people like the Sterlings, but to me, it represented hours of aching feet and stinging chemical burns on my hands. I wrapped it carefully in simple craft paper. A fancy gift bag was a luxury I couldn't afford. Arthur descended the stairs at 10 a.m., smelling of expensive cologne and authority. He walked the patio like a general inspecting a battlefield. He moved one balloon cluster 6 inches to the left, stared at the lemon slices I had meticulously arranged, and said without looking at me, "They're uneven. Do them again." By noon, the perfect family was in full swing. Beatrice appeared in a designer linen dress I'd spent an hour steaming, running a finger along the counter to check for dust. I caught her whispering to Arthur, "She only got you something cheap. Just brace yourself." Then Sloane arrived, clicking across the floors I'd waxed at dawn, handing Arthur a $700 Apple Watch she'd charged to his own emergency card. "This is my girl," Arthur beamed, kissing Sloane's forehead as the first guests arrived. "She always knows what her old man likes." I spent the next 6 hours as a ghost. I carried heavy trays, refilled wine glasses, and wiped condensation rings before they could mar the furniture. When a guest asked Beatrice why Maya wasn't sitting down to eat, she gave that practiced, hollow smile. "Oh, she loves to help. It's her way of showing gratitude. You know how it is with adopted ones." That word, gratitude, was the leash they used to keep me in line. They fed me the narrative that I was a burden they had graciously shouldered. But as the sun dipped below the Virginia tree line and the patio lights flickered on, that narrative was about to go up in flames. I stood in the kitchen, flour on my apron and a bruise to be on my heart, holding that craft paper package, having no idea it would be the last thing I ever gave him. The cool October air hit my face, and the sting on my cheek flared like a second slap. I walked along Patterson Avenue, leaving the bass notes of Arthur's party behind until the silence of the suburbs felt heavy and deliberate. I had no destination, just an internal compass pointing anywhere but back. I had my Jansport backpack, $340 in hidden tip money, and a manila envelope I'd rescued from the trash months ago. An official document with a government seal I didn't yet understand. I'd made it maybe 2 miles when headlights slowed behind me. A black Cadillac Escalade, polished to a mirror finish, rolled to a stop. My instinct was to bolt, but I was exhausted from a lifetime of running. I stood my ground. A man stepped out. He was in his mid-50s, tall and lean, wearing a charcoal coat that looked like it was tailored specifically for him. His hair was silver-threaded, but it was his eyes that stopped my breath. They were hazel green, wide-set, the exact eyes I looked at every morning in my own cracked mirror. Behind him, a woman with sharp features held a leather portfolio with the practiced air of an attorney. The man's hands were trembling. "I'm sorry to frighten you," he said, his voice cracking. "My name is Nathaniel Grant, and I believe, I know, I am your biological father." The world tilted. "That's not possible," I whispered, backing into a cold mailbox post. "My parents didn't want me. That's the story I was told my whole life." "You were told a lie," he replied. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph, creased and worn from years of handling. It was a woman with auburn hair and a smile that leaned slightly to the left, holding a toddler with hazel eyes. "Her name was Catherine. She was your mother. She died in a car accident when you were 2, and I have spent every single day since then trying to find you." The woman in the photo had my mouth, my chin. Looking at her felt like finally finding a word you've been searching for your entire life. The red-haired woman stepped forward. "I'm Eleanor Vance, Mr. Grant's attorney. We've been monitoring your situation for months. Tonight, when our investigators saw you leave the house in distress, we knew we couldn't wait any longer." She glanced at my face, her expression softening into something like steel. "We also saw what happened on that patio." They ushered me into the warmth of the SUV. There, Nathaniel told me the story that ripped the floor out from under me. Catherine had died instantly in that crash on I-64. Nathaniel had been in the ICU for 4 months with a shattered pelvis and a collapsed lung. While he was fighting for his life, a social worker named Marcus Vane told the court that Nathaniel had signed a voluntary relinquishment of his parental rights. "I was on a ventilator," Nathaniel said, his jaw tightening. "I couldn't hold a pen, let alone sign a legal document. But by the time I was strong enough to fight, the adoption was finalized. The files were sealed. My daughter was gone, hidden under a new name in a life I wasn't allowed to see." He didn't talk about the money he'd spent on private investigators or the years of dead ends. He just looked at me like I was a miracle. I sat there, clutching my frayed backpack, and realized the envelope I'd been carrying was the final piece of his puzzle. I pulled it out. The Title 4E disbursement summary. Eleanor scanned it under the dome light. "This is it," she whispered. "The state has been paying Arthur and Beatrice $810 a month for your care for 18 years. That's $175,000, Chloe." I looked out the window at the dark Virginia woods. All those years, Arthur called me a burden. But I wasn't a burden. I was a paycheck. I wasn't an orphan nobody wanted. I was a daughter who had been stolen for a profit. For the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like a storm. The hotel room Eleanor arranged was sterile, quiet, and smelled of lemon-scented bleach, a stark contrast to the damp cardboard scent of my storage closet. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the white sheets, unable to sleep. My mind kept looping back to one number, $810. Every month for 216 months, Arthur Sterling had essentially invoiced the state of Virginia for my existence. "I wasn't a child to him," I whispered to the empty room. "I was a line item." The next morning, Nathaniel met me in the lobby. He didn't push. He didn't demand a hug or call me daughter right away. Instead, he handed me a cup of coffee and a thick photo album. Inside were images of a brick bungalow in Richmond's Fan District with a bright red door. "That's the house you were born in," he said softly. "I still own it. I couldn't bring myself to sell the only place where I could still hear your laughter." But as much as my heart wanted to believe him, 18 years of being manipulated by Arthur had taught me to trust nothing but hard evidence. I looked Nathaniel in the eye. I need a DNA test, not because I don't want this to be true, but because I need to know for sure before I let myself feel anything. Nathaniel didn't flinch. He didn't get offended like Arthur would have. He simply nodded and said, "Of course. Eleanor has already booked the lab." While we waited 5 agonizing days for the results, the Sterlings didn't stay quiet. Arthur, realizing his investment had walked out the door, sent a letter to the hotel. He didn't know where I was, but he knew Eleanor's firm. Inside was a photo of me at 3 years old, sitting on his lap. On the back, he'd written, "Maya, this man is a stranger exploiting you. We are your family. I forgive you for your outburst at the party. Come home." The word forgive made me want to gag. He was forgiving me for being slapped. It was a classic Sterling move, gaslighting me into believing I was the problem. But then Eleanor arrived with a second set of documents, the ones that gave our case teeth. She spread them across the table like a surgeon preparing for an operation. First was the 2005 relinquishment form. Beside it was a report from Dr. Elaine Marsh, a top forensic handwriting analyst. "The signature on the original court document is a forgery," Eleanor explained, pointing to the loops in the letters. "It doesn't match a single one of Nathaniel's tax returns or contracts from that year. It was a professional job, but not perfect." Then she pulled out the smoking gun, bank records from a man named Marcus Vane, the social worker who had handled my case. 6 days before my adoption was finalized, a $5,000 wire transfer had landed in Vane's personal account. The source? Arthur Sterling's private checking. $5,000, I said, my voice trembling. That's what I was worth to them? The price of a used car? Nathaniel reached out, hovering his hand over mine, but not touching, giving me the space I desperately needed. "You were worth everything to me, Chloe, and they took it all." On the 5th day, the call came, 99.9998%. The science confirmed what my heart had suspected since I first saw Nathaniel's eyes. I wasn't an accident. I wasn't a burden. I was a grant. "We have enough," Eleanor said, closing her briefcase with a decisive click. "The DNA, the forgery report, and the Hoylo records. It's time to stop running and start fighting." Have you ever had to choose between the people who raised you and the truth that could set you free? It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But as I looked at that photo of the house with the red door, I knew I was done being Maya. I was ready to become Chloe again. The Richmond family court was a building made of cold brick and echoing hallways, a place where secrets went to be buried or birthed. I walked in wearing a navy blazer Nathaniel had bought me, the first piece of clothing I'd ever owned that hadn't been worn by someone else first. On my left was Nathaniel, and on my right was Eleanor Vance, carrying a banker's box that contained the wreckage of the Sterling family's lies. Arthur Sterling arrived minutes later, looking every bit the pillar of the community in his tailored gray suit. Beatrice was clutched to his arm, and Sloane trailed behind, looking bored, as if this were a minor inconvenience rather than a life-altering reckoning. Arthur's chin was tilted high, the look of a man who believed his reputation was an impenetrable shield. Then his eyes met mine. He didn't see the girl who stared at the floor anymore. He saw a woman standing tall, flanked by a father who looked exactly like her and a lawyer who looked like a shark. His mask didn't slip, but I saw his eyes do the math. Inside the courtroom, the air was thin. Eleanor stood before Judge Patricia Dwyer and laid out the case with the precision of a master architect. She started with the DNA, the 99.9998% that bridged the 18-year gap. Then came the handwriting analysis, proving the signature that stole me was a forgery. "Your Honor," Eleanor said, her voice resonant and steady, "a decree built on a lie is not a legal document. It is a crime scene." But the real shift happened when Eleanor projected the financial records onto the screen. Month after month of Title IV payments, $810, $810, $810. Then she called Derek Simmons, a social worker who had inspected the Sterling home after our petition was filed. I found the child's living quarters, Derek testified, his voice devoid of emotion, which made the facts hit harder. A 60-square-foot storage area next to the water heater, no window, a mattress salvaged from the curb, no medical or dental records existed for her after the age of 14. Despite the $175,000 in state funds provided for her welfare, there was no evidence that a single cent was spent on her health, comfort, or future. The courtroom went deadly silent. I looked at the gallery and saw two women from Arthur's church. Their faces were twisted in that particular brand of suburban horror, the realization that the man they'd cheered for was a monster behind closed doors. Then came the final blow, the $5,000 wire transfer to Marcus Vane. Arthur's lawyer tried to deflect, calling it a charitable donation, but Eleanor was relentless. A donation to a social worker's private bank account 1 week before an adoption is finalized isn't charity, Mr. Sterling. It's a transaction, Arthur snapped. He stood up, his face turning that deep, mottled crimson I knew so well. I gave that girl everything, he barked, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls. 18 years of food and a roof, and this is the thanks I get? Some con man shows up and I'm the villain? Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Judge Dwyer said, her voice like ice. It was then that the unthinkable happened. Beatrice, who had been sobbing quietly, suddenly stood up, not at the witness stand, but from the bench. I wrote the check, she whispered, her voice cracking the heavy silence. Arthur grabbed her arm. Beatrice, sit down. She pulled away, the first time I had ever seen her defy him. I wrote it, Your Honor. Arthur told me it was to expedite things. I've been protecting him for 18 years, but I watched him hit her. I watched him treat her like a servant while Sloane had everything. I can't do it anymore. The judge didn't need much more time. She spent 12 minutes reviewing the final affidavits while I watched the second hand on the wall clock tick away my old life. When she looked up, she addressed me directly. The evidence is unambiguous, Judge Dwyer ruled. The adoption of the child formerly known as Maya is declared void ab initio. It is annulled in its entirety. Your legal name is hereby restored to Chloe Grant. The sound of the gavel hitting the wood was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It wasn't just a sound. It was the shattering of my chains. Arthur was ordered to pay full restitution of the $175,000 to the state, and the judge referred the case for criminal prosecution for forgery and child neglect. As we walked out, Sloane caught up to me. She was crying, her foundation streaked with salt. I didn't know, she sobbed. I thought they were paying for my life with their own money. I looked at her, the girl who had filmed my pain for views. I hope you figure out who you are without his money, Sloane. I really do. But that's your journey, not mine. Today I live in a studio apartment in Richmond with massive windows that let in the morning sun. I'm studying culinary arts, choosing to cook because I love it, not because I'm forced to. Every Sunday I have dinner with Nathaniel at the house with the red door. We're still learning how to be a family, but we're doing it with the lights on. My journey taught me a vital lesson. Family is defined by safety and respect, not by scripts or stolen years. You never owe gratitude to those who thrive on your silence. Thank you for standing by me through this reckoning. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. What would you have done in my shoes? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, take care of yourselves and stay brave.